Hey everyone, I'm Kevin with JcrOffroad. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the installation of our Evap skid along with underbody protection and rock sliders for the Ford Bronco Sport. Now to begin, you're going to need to remove these felt underbody liners from both the driver and passenger side. They're going to remove very similar to one another, so we'll walk you through one side here and then let you get the other side removed. Now the one you see here might be just a little bit different than what you're working with because this one has been modified to some extent already in order to get our cat skid as well as gas tank skid here at the back installed. With that being said, the disassembly and removal process doesn't really change. You're just going to have one additional clip at the back of each of these as well as a couple extra nuts that I can't show you right here. So here toward the front of the skid, just behind this driver's side front tire, you're going to see that clip. There's also going to be another one of these, like I mentioned, at the rear. Again, ours is already removed. So just get a flat screwdriver or a panel tool like I have here. You can pop the center of that free and then pull the entire clip out and down. Then you'll just need a T30 Torx to remove the 3 screws up here at the front of this liner. Once you have those removed, the only thing holding this in place is going to be several of these little stamped nuts. Those can be removed with a 10mm socket. So once you get the last one of those removed, this should just drop down fairly easy and can be tossed to the side. So in our application, we are going to be installing both the Evap skid as well as the slider. Now you can install the Evap skid independently of the slider, however not the other way around. So if you're not installing the sliders at this time, just follow along, do the steps you have to do to get that Evap skid in place, and then you can always add those sliders later on. Now here we have the Evap skid and slider assembly for the driver's side of the vehicle. So we'll be bolting these together out here on the bench before they get installed. So the skid is going to have 3 holes along the outside flange that correspond with the 3 mounting tabs here on the inside edge of the slider. The slider itself is going to have forward-facing arrows both on this tab as well as on the bracket here, so you know which end is the front. And then to determine what's the front of your skid, you're just going to be looking for these 2 mounting slots here and obviously the 3 mounting holes for that slider. Once you know you've got the correct parts lined up, you'll want to find the 1/2-inch button heads as well as flange locking nuts in your hardware pack, and then it's just a matter of lining these 2 up and assembling with that hardware. So the button head bolt will slide in from the bottom, leaving the serrated flange nut for the top of that skid. So once you have all the hardware started, you can grab a 5/16 hex and a 3/4 wrench and tighten these up. Now if you're having any minor alignment issues once you have this up on the vehicle and are getting things bolted in place, you can always loosen these slightly for a little extra compliance, but this is going to make this one nice solid assembly to work with at this time. We do have a little bit of preparation work to do here on the vehicle before the slider and skid assemblies can be installed. So for one, you're going to see these square style cutouts here along the bottom edge of this plastic. Right now I'm working on the passenger side because we did most of our R&D work over on the driver's side and most of this is already done over there. So just take that into consideration. Now if you're only installing the skids at this time, you're going to skip this front one and then come back and cut the following 6. If you are installing both the slider and the skid assembly, you'll cut this one out as well at this time. Basically what you're going to be doing here is just getting a small pry tool behind this plastic to pull it out ever so slightly, and then you can take some wire cutters or potentially some tin snips, whatever you may have that's going to cut this plastic, and you're just continuing these edges straight down to remove this narrow center section. This is just going to give you access to drill your holes and clearance for the mounting hardware. Now each of these locations you're going to have to mark, center punch, and drill a hole to accept your 1/4-inch button head hardware. So your holes are going to be in the center of this opening from side to side, and then you're going to want to measure up from the bottom edge of this pinch seam 5/16 of an inch. Now the height is going to be the more critical measurement here because we have quite a bit of front to rear compliance in the slots on our brackets, but you want to stay as accurate as possible with both measurements. Once you have it marked out, just grab that center punch and place a nice mark there. Now a good sharp step bit is going to work really well in this application. If you don't have that, just start small with something like this 1/8 inch drill bit that I have here and work your way up to a 1/4 inch. Now this is a fairly hard material down here on this pinch seam, but obviously it can be drilled. You're just going to want to make sure that you have some good sharp drill bits, as well as a little bit of tap and drill lubricant. Now, much like up front, this final hole here at the rear of the vehicle is only going to be drilled if you're installing the sliders at this time. So for this hole, you're going to go from the current rearmost hole, measure from the center of that back 7 3/4. That should put you just ahead of the back edge of this plastic cutout here. Again, you're looking to be 5/16 up. So I'm just going to put a small mark there at 7 3/4 and then double check my height. So the key with this one is just going to be to make sure that you have clearance for the bolt head and it's not going to run into the plastic here, because again, we have a little bit of compliance in the slots on our slider. Then you'll just center punch and drill this, much like the previous holes. Once you have all of your holes drilled, we'll come down underneath the vehicle. These are going to be at the rear of the subframe, just behind the engine. These are your subframe tie-ins. You're going to be removing just the 2 rear mounting bolts for that using a 13mm socket. That is just to let this down just enough that our skid can slide in place just over top of that and be secured with that factory hardware. Now that's going to be the same on both the driver and passenger side. Now this vehicle is already equipped with our catalytic converter skid, and if yours is as well, you'll have to do the same here. You'll just need to loosen both fasteners here on the mid mount for that cat skid, and then at the rear you can remove one of the bolts, loosen the one next to it, and then remove the top mounting bolt up here just to kind of let this bracket swing down and out of the way temporarily. Once this skid is back in place, you can just nest this bracket underneath it and bolt both of those back in place. Now with that being said, since we have the cat skid in place, we already have a nut tab in place here up in the uniframe. So again, if you're not installing a cat skid at this time or you don't already have one, you'll have to install that nut tab, which is included with your Evap skid. Now moving back closer to the rear of the vehicle, you're going to have 4 of these little rectangular nut tabs. Those are going to go in place in these 2 holes here. This is on the passenger side where you'll also see this exhaust hanger. The driver's side is going to have these same holes in a very similar location. So these, you just want to make sure that the pre-installed nut is up toward the top side, and then you just slide those in and then back over the center of the hole. Then you're going to need a 13mm socket back here as well to remove that exhaust hanger we were just talking about. Now, much like the brackets on our cat skid, you can just let that hang for now, and then once the skid is installed, this will just simply slide back over top of it. Now you have all your prep work complete, and we can begin sliding the skids and sliders up into place. So now we've moved our skid and slider assembly up here close to where it's going to be mounted so that we can show you now this front mounting flange sliding up underneath that tie-in bracket So I've got mine supported on a trans jack here under our vehicle hoist. If you're doing this on the ground, you could also do pretty much the same thing with a floor jack. Basically just slide it back and then get it up over top of this bracket and then lined up with that factory mounting hole. While you're doing this, you just want to make sure that you keep the slider and that outer mounting flange inside of the factory pinch seam. With that lined up, we're going to begin loosely installing hardware to kind of locate this and hold it in place. So I'm going to start with that factory bolt. Now with that bolt loosely installed and kind of holding the skid in place, you can then reinstall the second bolt for that tie-in bracket. Then you'll just continue to press this skid up toward the bottom of the vehicle body and frame. As this goes up, you want to make sure that you navigate this line into the appropriate cutout here on the side of the skid. So then you can work your way down along the inside edge of the skid and begin installing the 5/16 button heads into the 3 nut tabs along here. Now again, if you're already equipped with the cat skid, just make sure that you're reinstalling this bracket at the same time into this nut tab. Now with the 2 nut tabs here at the rear of the skid, they can sometimes slide inside of there and become just a little bit difficult to get the bolt started. If that's the case, you can always use the end of your T-handle or even a small screwdriver to just try and get inside of the nut and align those as needed. Now you can jump back to the outside of the vehicle. Here you'll be installing 1/4 20 button heads with washers along with serrated flange nuts from the inside. These are going to be going through those holes that you drilled earlier. So you'll just need a 5/32 hex, preferably on a long extension like this. That just makes it a little easier to reach through here and line that up. Now go ahead and get all of those started before we tighten anything up. Now at this point, only if you're installing the sliders at this time, you'll be also installing this rear tie-in bracket. So that's going to line up with the 2 holes here at the bottom edge of the slider. There you'll install 2 more 1/4 20 bolts, and then it's also going to line up with 1 factory hole here up on the body. Now to secure it, at the top side you're going to get another nut tab. There's a hole up here just above this hole that you'll maneuver that through and then line it up with the factory hole to start a 5/16 button head. So once you get the hardware started loosely and holding that in place, you'll simply push it up and tight, and then using the mounting hole here in the bracket as a guide, you'll center punch and drill that one as well. Now we're going to recommend pulling the bracket down out of the way while you drill that hole, just so that you can go back and touch up any exposed metal surfaces. Now in our case, we already drilled this hole during our R&D process, so I was able to just simply install that bolt at this time. And once you have that done, you can work your way back through and tighten up all of this mounting hardware. Now only when you're installing the sliders alongside the Evap skid, you're going to be cutting out and drilling in this front location. So when you're drilling that, unlike what you see here with the hole in the center, which we did during our R&D process, you're actually going to want to drill this one just slightly forward, kind of in the front third of that opening, like I have it kind of roughly marked out here. The reason for that is there's a pinch seam up behind there that's going to prevent you from installing a nut on the back side along with your 1/4 inch bolt here from the outside. So just be conscious of that when you're drilling. Double check before you even go to that front location that that seam is not in the way just due to manufacturer variation, because you could also move to the back of that if you have adequate space there as well. Now after you have everything tight, your installation's complete. So if you have any questions about this installation, you can always check our website for detailed installation instructions. You can email us any questions at info@jcroffroad.com, or you can give us a call at 269-353-1184.